Hi, how are you? I hope you are doing well and your loved ones are doing well and everyone's safe. I'm okay. Belgium is in the middle of the start of the second wave of COVID-19. It's terrifying, really. But for now, we're okay. Our family is okay, so we're very grateful and blessed. And we're going to do everything we can to crush the curve again. And I'm happy I get to share an episode with you this week because it really brightens my day to create this story for you and share it with you. Happy listening. Welcome to the Lesbian Romantic Podcast. This is More Than Fun and Games, Part 4, Armadillo Adventure. Holy shit, Leah said as she walked into the small suite's living room. Emily placed their 2 suitcases in the hallway and closed the door. That cool? Leah walked over to the low table in the middle of the room. It looked like a control panel of a Star Trek ship with a large screen. She grinned when she spotted chairs with more buttons built into the armrest. Hurrying over to one of them, she said, "That cool." Okay, interesting. Emily chuckled after joining Leah in the living area. Leah pressed a random button on the armrest. "Computer activated." A voice rang through the room. Leah's eyes widened. Emily's did too. "Hey Siri, can you get me some coffee?" Leah joked in excitement. "It's not Siri." Emily laughed, but she was interrupted by the computer's voice. "I am not Siri." The computer agreed. Emily grinned and pointed at the ceiling. A moment later, the voice added, "Coffee menu now available on the main control panel." Leah and Emily looked at each other in shock. "Cancel coffee." Leah giggled and quickly moved to the table. She wanted to see what else she could discover on the large screen. Emily beat her to it. "That's hilarious," she commented, tapping a few things. "The interface is a bit clunky," she continued, clearly thinking aloud. "But I like the idea of making the hotel information and services accessible in this way." Leah arched her eyebrow in amusement. "Oh, really?" Emily tapped the screen a few more times. "Yeah, it's fun." Leah was tempted to point out that Full Circle Games might be a cooler company than Emily had given them credit for, but she decided not to pursue it. They had only just gotten here and she didn't want to seem pushy about the job Emily was here to discuss. "I'm going to check out the bedroom." Nodding, Emily said, "Okay." She swiped something away on the screen. Her lips curved up into a satisfied smile. Leah made her way over to the double doors at the other end of the room. Her stomach fluttered with excitement when she slowly opened one and stuck her head inside the room behind it. Her first thought was, "Damn it, no UFO bed." She wasn't disappointed for long, though. Leah stepped into the most beautiful, most romantic room she had ever seen. She blinked a few times to take it all in. There was so much to see. The walls didn't feel like walls because thousands of stars had lit up the moment she had walked inside. Even the floor was covered in them, all placed in such a way that she felt like she was floating in space. The bed had the same wooden design as the large park entrance. It looked like a tiny planet, circulating around the distant sun she spotted on the right. The sheets were a lively green with beautiful flowers here and there. "Whoa," Emily gasped from behind her. Leah turned around and smiled. "It's amazing, isn't it?" Emily walked up to one of the walls and ran her fingers over it. "They've done a fantastic job hiding this window." Placing her hand on her hip, Leah took in the room again. She had been so impressed by this make-believe mini-universe that she had forgotten that this was a hotel room. She squinted at the wall. "There's a window here?" "Yes, it's a blackout effect," Emily said, picking up a small device from the bed and pressing a button. The whole room changed instantly. 2 windows appeared right in front of Leah, making her raise her hand to protect her eyes. The walls were now bright blue skies. The floor had transformed into the same pattern as the bedsheets, grass with wildflowers. Emily chuckled. "That's a bit over the top." Leah's jaw dropped. Are you kidding me? It's awesome. They do have some smart tricks here, Emily commented, sitting down on the bed and knocking on wood. Are you curious how they're pulling it off? Leah grinned. Emily arched an eyebrow at her. Who says I don't know already? This made Leah laugh. She always laughed when Emily got a bit cocky. Okay, Miss Genius, she said and plopped down onto the bed next to her. Of course you do. Snorting, Emily bumped her shoulder against Leah's. All right, okay, I'll admit it. I have no idea how she's pulling some of this stuff off. Wrapping her arm around Emily, Leah answered, Perfect. You can ask her all about it tomorrow. Yes, I guess I can, Emily responded, smiling. It might not be what she wants to talk about. Are you nervous about the interview? Leah asked. Because Leah sure was nervous about it. What if Emily's meeting with Jahani was horrible? Would Emily regret coming here? Would it ruin the whole week? Honestly, I don't think of it as an interview, Emily said slowly. But sure, I'm a little nervous about meeting Jahani. Because her work was so impressive? Leah probed. It took Emily a moment to reply. She tilted her head and opened her mouth, but then took a few more seconds before finally saying, Her invention propelled an entire industry forward quite suddenly. Emily gestured for the walls and the bed, but she moved on to do other things. It made her a bit of an outcast. She's almost like a name in the history books now, you know? Leah looked up at the clouds that were floating by on the walls. They looked so real she felt like she was sitting in a field staring up at the sky. Her work looks very much alive to me, Leah said, thinking out loud. It does, Emily admitted. I just wonder why she's using her talent to create these gimmicks and games. It seems like she's doing the world a disservice. Leah's brow furrowed. She instinctively felt that Emily was no longer talking about just Jahani right now. I think Jahani might be of a different view, Leah said carefully. Probably, Emily said, wringing her hands in her lap. They sat on the bed together for another minute. Leah wanted to talk more about this, but was afraid to. They had already had 2 uncomfortable conversations this morning. She wanted Emily to relax and enjoy this time instead of worrying. Let's go check out the park, she said. What the hell was that? Emily laughed loudly as they walked outside. Leah wiped off her cheeks as tears of laughter streamed down them. I have no idea. Bending forward, hands on knees, Emily gasped. I haven't laughed this hard in ages. Leah rubbed her stomach. I know, my stomach hurts. Straightening, Emily blew out a shaky breath. Her face broke into a delighted grin. Leah smiled back at her, feeling so careless and light that she thought she could probably fly. Those armadillos totally kicked our ass, she giggled. Emily nodded empathically. Oh yeah, I did not see that last move coming. Leah laughed again as she thought of the ride they had just gotten out of. When they had first read about it, it had sounded a bit childish. They had almost skipped the ride because of it. It was called Armadillo Adventure, and the concept was pretty simple. You went on a trip through the red landscape of Oklahoma with a family of armadillos. It was your job to protect the family and scare away predators and intruders. Emily and Leah had walked by the building and decided to give the ride a chance since there had been no line. They had been seated in one of those small simulator rooms that moved in all directions. Soon enough, they were going up and down a small track through a canyon in Oklahoma. Their virtual cart often avoided slamming into the rocks at the very last moment, and the ride was more fun than Leah had expected. After a minute, Emily and Leah got to grab their virtual water guns and had to chase away predators from their friendly hosts, the armadillo family. At first, it was mainly snakes and other animals. A bit further into the ride, the cute armadillo family needed help chasing away noisy people from their path. Leah and Emily had a blast scaring away the annoying people with their water guns. when the cart had come to a standstill in a beautiful area of the canyon. A sudden twist in the story had taken both of them by surprise. What? They had suddenly found themselves surrounded by several families of armadillos. The cute, cartoonish animals had pulled water guns from behind their backs and had started shooting at Leah and Emily. Real water beams coming at them from all corners of the room made the ambush feel very real. I guess we now know what that water warning was all about. Leah giggled some more, wringing her shirt in her hands. Emily tugged at her shorts. Part of them was sticking to her behind. Yeah, can't say they didn't warn us. We'll be dry in no time. Leah grinned, spreading her arms. It's still hot outside. Let's walk for a while and maybe get some ice cream, Emily suggested. Leah pointed at her. Yes, now you're talking. Emily held out her hand and Leah grabbed it happily, squeezing. Gosh, this is a great park. It is, Emily agreed immediately. There's something very unique about it. That's what I was thinking, Leah said, looking up at the towering trees next to the path. It's not as busy as other parks. Might be the time of day, Emily smiled. True, but there's so much space between the different rides, Leah said, gesturing around them. And with all the trees, it doesn't feel as fake, Emily suggested. Leah tilted her head. Yes, you read my mind. I've been thinking the same thing. It almost feels like it's an educational park instead of a theme park. Exactly, Leah agreed, now realizing Emily had perfectly summarized something she couldn't find the words for. Like with the armadillos. They totally held up a mirror to remind us that we too were intruders. Sure did, Emily said, raising her hand above her eyes. Hey, I think I see an ice cream booth over there. Leah perked up. She spotted a small building in the distance and smiled when she noticed that it was shaped like a gigantic acorn. They have the craziest structures here, she said. Yes, Jahani sure had fun while designing this park, Emily replied. Leah turned to face her. You think she did that? Design all this stuff? A confident grin spread across Emily's lips. I bet she was involved with every single detail. There was admiration in Emily's voice. Leah had noticed it before whenever they ran into something cool. There was a natural theme in this part of the park. Nothing space-like, but there was still lots of impressive technology everywhere. Not such a silly gaming company anymore? Leah teased before she could stop herself. Emily rolled her eyes dramatically but then smiled. Maybe not. Leah wiggled in delight. Awesome. I can't believe we get to spend the whole week here. Emily pulled Leah closer, wrapping her arms around her in the middle of the path. Sighing happily, Leah pressed into her. Her heart swelled as they kissed tenderly, and she soon forgot about ice cream. Emily mumbled against Leah's lips. How about we go back to our room for some rest first? This was part 4 of More Than Fun and Games. I am so proud of this podcast and its community. Running a listener-funded podcast is always a risk, but I wouldn't want it any other way. I want to keep creating these stories from the heart. Thank you for listening. Thank you for giving back. And let's keep doing this together. Let's keep doing things differently. I hope this episode made you smile. That's always my goal. And I will see you in the next episode in 2 weeks. Thank you, and bye.